Hey everyone. So I was just reading this book. It's called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And I was reading the end of this chapter in this book. And the chapter is about the top regret, which is I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself and not the life others expected of me. And man, do I recommend this book. It was so vivid. And I was reading this late at night, and it was just one of those moments where I was just so pulled into the book and I thought I was there. And then once it finished, I just snapped out of the chapter and I just was breathing hard. I thought like I was about to die because it was just so vivid and so touching. Um, Basically, what happened was it was a very descriptive story, almost like I was there, of this woman who she had failed to live to what she wanted to do her whole life, which was travel and escape the tyranny of her husband, who was very controlling, and she never did. And the author of this book, she does a great job of just walking through this. The author was the caretaker for this woman, and she had seen hundreds of people pass away, and it was the most vivid thing ever. It reminded me of about a year ago. I was watching an episode of a TV series called Doctor Who. It's very, very famous in the United Kingdom. And there's this one episode where the doctor, I believe it wasn't the doctor who got old, but the premise of the story basically is he's a time traveling uh, guy from, I guess, another planet who looks human but is like exceptionally smart, 1,000 years old, has all this knowledge and all this ridiculous stuff, and a very quirky, confident personality. And so the story is, one of the curses of the doctor is the fact that he can live so long. So he gets very attached to the humans he meets on his journey, and they die of old age or whatever, and it's a very sad thing. It's a theme that's often played in a lot of films and stories. Wolverine, another that theme's played as well. But I remember this episode. I was watching it late at night with the comfort of my blanket over me, and there was a time in my life where you know things weren't going that well, but I was just so engrossed in this show, and I was very excited about it, and it was very entertaining despite that. And it's not always the best thing to do, engross yourself in the fantasy world, but it was a hobby of mine, and it was something I was passionate about and very interested in. So I was watching this episode, long story short, and um, it was such a visual, compelling story that I was so captivated and engrossed into it that I literally thought I was there. And um, when the episode ended and the person died, and there were just scenes where they're just so old, and you saw them very young and now they're old, I literally just snapped out of it, and I was just breathing heavily, and I was just like, I was looking at my own hand, and it was the same experience when I read this chapter, because it was just so vivid, and it was just portrayed so well that it felt like I had gone through all that, and I was old, and that was it for me, and um, that was the end of my life. And those moments, it just really makes you appreciate your youth and things like that, and it really just makes you appreciate and be grateful for the fact that you're alive and healthy, and you still have time in front of you. You know, I I have a lot of things that I want to do in my life, and this chapter really just orchestrates one of those themes. Uh, so in this book, the theme of this chapter is I wish I had had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. You can kind of see it there. And here is a woman, and I recommend you pick up this book at your local library, or buy it used or new, or the audiobook version, whatever. And I guarantee you, I was sitting there and was reading these last two pages, and it was just so vivid, and it's just so almost tragic, and you know for someone who's always just kind of like, I mean, for most young people, it's kind of like far off in the distance, and they can't really understand it. Like, um, I've seen people who are maybe complain about old age, and um, people who may talk about it, but this chapter really just orchestrates, and it just visually describes very well what it's like, and it's almost um, it's very compelling, because here's a woman who she did what her family and her husband wanted, and because of it, she denied her own needs and her own desires and goals in life. And what made this chapter so compelling was the fact that uh, she literally talks to the author throughout this whole thing, up until her last breath. Not exactly her last breath, but on her dying bed, the moment she dies, um, she keeps telling her, "Promise me you won't make the same mistake." And this was a amazing woman. She had friends, family. She was loving, great person, and I think a lot of people just they don't see old individuals from this light. They see them as something that you have to you know, care for, that you really don't want to, and it's like a bother. And this woman, you know, she was a great woman until the end. She was a pretty normal person, and she wasn't trying to be a bother. It was just like her age made it a problem. Like she couldn't even go to the bathroom, and it wasn't her fault. And out of the kindness of her own heart, she refused to use the commode. I don't know what that is, but I'm assuming it's some sort of built-in toilet in her bed, something like that. She refused to use it, and she says she had to use the toilet in the next room, not for her own sake, but because she didn't want her caretaker, the author of this book, to have to deal with cleaning that stuff up, because she felt like this girl was such a great girl because she sung to her every day, um, played instruments to her, and so forth, and did all this stuff to really, I guess, please her. And I'm probably butchering it. I honestly think I'm butchering this book, this chapter, but it was such a touching story, and you know, it really it really touched me. This girl, she had gone through a lot of troubles in her own life. She had not followed her passion herself. I'm talking about the caretaker, um, and she went through many years of banking and managing, and it wasn't something she was very passionate about. And she finally broke free of that, and it's amazing. She promised on her deathbed, "Hey, I'm gonna live true to my heart." And there's more to the story than that. I can't summarize it all. There's moments where, it was the day and she knew she was gonna die that day, and she she refused to uh, call her friends and family over because she didn't want to bring more pain. And then her caretaker, the author of this book, she pretty much goes on and on about how, hey, it's okay, they want to say their goodbyes. Please, please let me call them. And it's just this very, it's an incredible story. You know, hopefully I don't have to live like that. Warren Buffett's one person who, he's like 80 something, and then Charlie Munger, his business partner, is like late 80s, and they're both very live and very quick and clever and so forth. And, um, you know, I want to be like that. Hopefully I can get to that age and then die without having to go through dementia or Alzheimer's and memory loss and being unable to go to the bathroom myself and so forth. And it's like all the money in the world can't really fix some of that stuff sometimes. So it's a very interesting thing. And I mean, what this has taught me is that, I mean, it's something I'm very thankful that I've picked up as early as I have, but at the same time, you know, I'm not really that young anymore, but I'm still very thankful that I've picked up and I'm working towards. And it also taught me that not everyone has a luxury, or not everyone gets everything they want in life. And there's people who die without really being truly fulfilled and having these huge regrets and experiencing pain in their life or a lack of happiness. And this book is all about things that's in a lot of ways under your own control. It lists these 5 big regrets, and they're all under your control. So that's a great place to start, you know. And through my learning of self-development and everything and all that I've consumed, I'm moving more and more towards the side where I'm starting to realize that a lot of things are your own responsibility and in your own control. And I mean, I'm a huge, I guess you could say I'm a huge person who used to and still do fall into the trap of victimizing myself. But the more and more I learn about it, it's just like it's not completely true. It's not true at all, and it's very interesting. You know, I read 2 non-related books over the last week or so, and they were No More Mr. Nice Guy and Authentic Happiness. One's on happiness, one's on being more about nice guy psychology and why it's developed and why it's not good for developing a relationship with a significant other. So they were psychology books, but unrelated topics. And on top of that, I've been watching self-development, dating advice, lectures, courses, stuff like that. And you know, from the scientific experiments and studies and things shown, it's like all these things, it's very interesting because they all mentioned that you gotta stop victimizing yourself, you just gotta stop complaining, you gotta stop whining. People have had it much tougher than you in the past, and they still do, and they've overcome that. And a lot of things are under your control. So I'm still working through it. Again, it's not, excuses still come to mind, but let's all work through it together. And I mean, this book is just a very interesting thing to just read. See you guys later.